people to remember the ice harvest business and storage and use of ice, they have to be around 70 years of age to remember that. And so this, us old-timers, as we worked on this project, it brought back a lot of memories and sharpened up our past thinking.
But always sometime between November and the 1st of May, there was time that the Lord made ice. So when they was right, you had to cut it.
On a sunny hot day in June 1994, the community of Strafford, Vermont held an old-fashioned ice cream social. The reason for the gathering was to celebrate the completion of some restoration work on the Justin Smith Morrow homestead. In keeping with the historic spirit of the event, ice cream was made the traditional way, in old hand-cranked freezers cooled with cracked ice. In the same way that homemade ice cream is special, the ice used to create it was special too. This ice was also, in a way, handmade. Today, ice has become a commodity we take for granted. A trip to our refrigerator supplies us with almost all we will ever need. It was not always so. Earlier that year in February, the people of Strafford tried their hand at ice harvesting. Using traditional tools, blocks of ice were cut from the Morrow Farm pond, transported by horse team, and stored at the newly renovated ice house on the estate. Al Wilder, who has been a leading figure at the Brookfield Ice Festival, was on hand to explain the techniques.
Takes about a ton. If you've got a cow, it takes about 1.5 tons of ice to keep the cow's milk fresh from the springtime when it starts to get warm till fall when it starts to get cold. And for a family, it takes about 5,000 pounds of ice to hold a family through the summertime. They would also keep the snow off the ice with a wooden plow, a V-type plow. If it got too heavy and too much snow, they'd make windrows on the ice, and then they'd cut the ice in between the windrows on a big pond like Brookfield Pond. On this one here, it's easy. You can keep a shovel and keep it clear. Down in the exhibition area there, you saw what we call a ice plow, and the ice plow is nothing more than a metal plow with a single track on it. That was pulled by a horse, and it would score the ice into squares. They'd go north and south and east and west and make a square depending on the size block they wanted at the top. So your blocks would be about 12 inches wide by about 26 to 30 to 50 long and 8 inches deep, which is the depth of the ice. That was the standard size block. So there was actually very little sawing done. As those of you who have tried sawing will notice that it takes quite a bit of effort to saw a 24-inch thick block of ice. It would take quite a bit of effort to saw even an 8-inch thick block of ice. So what happens is that they saw the ice plow that you saw down below, scored the ice down to within about 2 inches of the water. You never wanted to let any water in the channel because then it would freeze and you'd be right back to where you were in the beginning. You'd go along with the breaker bar, and on that scored portion, you just break off the piece of ice that floats out of the channel. You use your pike pole over there to push it down to wherever your device is to lift it out of the water was, and put it on the wagon and let it go. Now this here can lift about 250 pounds, this rig here. It was used just about like you see right here. It's was put on, you put it on the ice on a plank, the farmer would bring his wagon by, he'd put the ice on the wagon, and he'd take it to his ice house or to one on the place that he was cutting it from. This is an uninsulated ice house, so you put sawdust in the bottom, about 12 inches thick on the bottom, and then fill in the kegs. You'd have the kegs so they slightly float together, at a slight angle, and they'll float in together, and you'd have a square and you'd stack them up. As you stacked them up, you put water in between the cracks and they would freeze together. Now you say, well, why did we do that? Well, we just cut the block out and had it empty, and now here we are freezing it all back together. This would keep the ice longer. And then you put the sawdust around the outside of the ice house, between the wall of the ice house and the ice itself. So your only sawdust was on the bottom and around the sides. In the springtime, when you needed a block of ice, you'd go into your ice house, take an ice pick, and go right down that line that you just froze together. You can see it very easily, and that ice just breaks right out. No problem. No problem at all.
Ice harvesting in the United States has a long history, but it was not until the 1800s that the use of ice to cool and preserve food was commonplace. In rural areas and on farms, the harvesting of ice was a community activity. Groups of farmers would gather and help each other cut the ice that each needed to get through the summer. The demand for ice in larger towns and cities grew to the point where a major industry formed. Huge ice harvesting and storage operations were formed in the Northeast from Maine to the Great Lakes. These outfits built, maintained, and filled ice houses that held 30,000 to 80,000 tons. The peak for ice production in the U.S. was in the year 1886, when 25 million tons of ice were harvested. At that time, there were 160 large commercial ice houses on the Hudson River alone. In Maine, on the Kennebec River, there were 4,000 men and 350 horses on the river at the same time, harvesting ice day and night. The coming of electricity and electric refrigeration brought rapid decline to the ice business. By 1925, there were virtually no large-scale commercial ice harvesters in operation. A key figure in the history of ice harvesting in Strafford is Justin Smith Morrill. A man of uncommon character and ability, Morrill was born in Strafford in 1810. By the age of 38, he was financially secure enough to retire from his career as a storekeeper and devote his time to pursuing his many interests. He was elected to the United States House of Representatives in 1854, and 12 years later to the Senate, where he served for 32 years. Senator Morrill's most celebrated accomplishment as a public servant was the Land Grant College Act, signed by President Lincoln in 1862. His homestead was begun in 1848, and sometime after that, Senator Morrill got the idea to build an ice house and harvested and kept ice there for use on his farm. Elsewhere, it is a virtual certainty that farmers in the community were aware of and using ice by the late 1800s.
I'm not going to identify the year for certain, but it probably was 1935. I was going with a woman who's now been my wife for some 57 years. We were not married at the time. Her father, who was my father-in-law, of course, later had this pond over beyond South Strafford, about a mile and a half, and a considerable ice cutting operation.
When I was a kid up on the farm, father had nice horses, and I, quick as I got big enough to drive them, we was around doing work with them, rolling the roads in the winter, putting up ice, hauling cordwood.
Our farm was up in the Old City Falls area, up a steep hill, and the first year we cut our ice down here on a mill dam in the village and had to haul it home up a steep hill. And the horses didn't like that climb at all. So our neighbor Glenn Titus and my dad, Walter Campbell, they got together and built a spring-fed ice pond. And then they could haul their ice downhill instead of uphill. And the horses liked that a lot better.
Generally, when the ice was right, it would take about 2 weeks of hard work to put up the ice for the Strafford Creamery. And I drove the horses to haul ice. Some of it was cut on the Marl Pond. Some of it was cut on the mill pond that used to be down in the lower end of the village. There used to be a big pond, mill pond, and they sometimes cut ice off in the brook. And other times they cut ice up to the Jostler Pond.
The creamery was the big buyer, and they wanted the ice to be at least 16 inches thick. And that was cut into what they called double cakes, 16 inches one way, 32 inches the other. Well, the thing of it is, if you start cutting ice on a pond like this, as quick as you open it up, in other words, get open water, the ice gains in thickness much more rapidly than it does before you open it. And so once they got the cut in, it was a case of either cut it pretty quick or it would get to an undesirable thickness. And sometimes the creamery ice would be probably 20, 22 inches thick before they got through putting ice into the creamery, and those cakes 16 by 32 by say 20 inches would weigh about 300 pounds. And I think the creamery put in around 6,000 to 6,500 cakes.
When I first remember the creamery, and when they put up ice, they didn't buy milk, they bought cream. And everybody had a home separator, and they'd separate the milk, sell the cream, feed the milk to the pigs and calves. And then they, during that time, making butter, it was, what they did was just make good creamy butter. And then, I can't tell just when it was, but then they shifted over and bought whole milk. You took the milk down there in cans. They churned it and made butter, but they also made cottage cheese.
And that's when that, being so much closer to the Strafford Creamery, that my folks decided that they'd be better off sending fluid milk instead of separating the milk into skim milk and cream and making butter. So that's when they started thinking about ice. And the first year, I guess it would have been 1930, yes, because we moved here in November of 29. 1930, my dad built a ice house on the north side of our barn, and that next winter, the winter of 30 and 31, put up ice for the first time.
Jack would saw 1,000 cakes when they was filling the creamery. That would be 500 doubles, and it was marked and sawed in that fashion, and I think they used to cut it out with a hand saw, such as you've got right here behind us, and in about 100 cake lots, 10 by 10 if you will. And once that cake of, let's say, 100 cakes was cut loose and floated, then you took the chisel or splitter, whatever you wanted to call it, and you split these cakes right off. And they were split very easily, of course, and very straight for that matter. And of course, you had to split them both ways to get the cake of ice. You'd split this strip, and then you'd split the strip the other way. And I think they did that in about 100 cake lots. And they'd handle 1,000 cakes a day.
At first, you were up they had it up on a ramp. The ice house was down, and you could drive up on the back. It's how you go into Mrs. Prescott's down there now. The road is up there, and the ice house was down on the flat. So the first ice unloaded easy, and then when it got up higher, they had a pulley up in there and a rope on it, and you unhitch one horse, and the horse would snake the ice right up into the top.
My dad built a large cement tub, and it was in two sections. One section for the milk cans to cool the milk, and that's where I put the ice when I was home. And the other part of the tub was for the cattle and horses and so forth for drinking water. And so until we were able to get electricity, that is how we cooled our milk. And of course, we had a milk truck that would come every morning. Richard Prescott, who lived at that time where the Huntington Horse Farm is, he contracted with the creamery to haul the fluid milk to the creamery each day. And so at night we had to cool our milk, but in the morning we'd finish milking, and of course that milk truck would come right away.
I think the total amount, if you figured single cakes, was somewhere in the vicinity of 9,000 cakes a year that they cut and sold. And of course it was an income. And there'd be probably 4 men on the pond. When you come to take those cakes, particularly the creamery cakes, 300-pounders we'll say, out of the water, you'd be right where on the edge of the ice, of course, and you'd be right where they'd go down the chute. And you'd take hold of the bottom of the cake with the tongs, pick it up, let it go back into the water. And then as it went into the water, it would rebound up out of the water, and you'd catch the top of the cake and pull it onto the ice. It was not too heavy work, but you had to know how to do it.
Everybody was looked forward to that ice job down to the creamery to earn a few dollars. And money was a scarce article back in those times.
You may wonder how they stood up to pull cakes. If you know what a mowing machine size is, and the individual sections on a mowing machine size were taken, of course used ones, was taken to a blacksmith shop, and they turned the 3 corners down, probably half 3/4 an inch. And they were bolted with stove bolts, as I recall, right through the heel of the boot. And of course, they had countersink screws, so you didn't have to walk on a screw head or whatnot. But those sections were bolted right to the heel of your boots. And of course, the good, clear, hard ice that you were walking on. And you could set those, and you could pull all you could pull without any danger of slipping. And of course, when you get down to the house and was going into the kitchen, you walked on your toes. You better believe. You got told to. And so on. So that's the way it was done. And that was, I'm going to say around 90, well, in the vicinity of 34, 35, that's when it was. And the wife and I was married in 36, and that was a year or two before we were married. And that was the deal. And it's the only time I ever worked there, because I knew about it before and after, because it was quite a little enterprise. You know, of course, oh boy, 4 o'clock in the morning, down below zero with a kerosene lantern. Yeah, I tell you.
And it was to about 1944, I guess, when electricity came up to the farm.
And as quick as electricity come, that was the end of the ice business.
We were glad, of course, to see the ice age pass into history, and so that we could enjoy the modern technology of electricity and all the things that went with it.
Henry David Thoreau described ice harvesting in Walden, published in 1854. While yet it is cold January, and snow and ice are thick and solid, the prudent landlord comes from the village to get ice to cool his summer drink, impressively, even pathetically wise to foresee the heat and thirst of July now in January. It may be that he lays up no treasures in this world which will cool his summer drink in the next. He cuts and saws the solid pond, unroofs the house of fishes, and carts off their very element and air, held fast by chains and stakes like corded wood, through the favoring winter air, to wintry cellars, to underlie the summer there. These ice cutters are a merry race.
The whole project has worked out really, really well. It's involved a whole range of people in the community. It's done a lot to not only publicize the homestead and the works of Senator Morrill, but it's also done a lot to honor the traditions and the work and the lifestyle of the older people in town. And that's, I think, meant a lot to everybody. Kids have learned a lot. The older people in town have seen their skills and the work they've done be reaffirmed. And it's been a real successful project all the way along. We're really very happy with it. And the ice cream came out good, too.
Bye, boys. Bye. Bye now. Bye. 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 Something in there. Not bad. Bye. Bye.